My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piran Nyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue with Mahan's meditation method technique. And here I spoke about, the last time I spoke about, actually the last few times I spoke about the meditational technique and the benefits of this meditation. And I'm going into the details now of this meditation. And the last time I spoke about what the three stages of the initiation process and the practice. The first stage is raising the Kundalini, how it gives a focused mind and a significant intellectual growth because parts of the brain starts regenerating, particularly for those who, in the early phases of this meditation, you'll see that be a rapid growth. And when we age, parts of our brain starts the growth and the density starts declining. But if you practice meditation, it will maintain or even get better. There's something called neurogenesis. So first stage helps with this. Second stage helps with bringing down that energy, and it keeps the body healthy and our overall well-being healthy. And I'll talk about that shortly. And then the third stage is actually the cleansing phase, where there is a number of things that the guru will do and also teach the student on how to practice this third stage to awaken the top eye. And in normal circumstances, when it takes about 21 days to get all three stages of this initiation, in this process, we see that three important parts of our body, what they call the inner eye, the chain of inner eye, which is from the base eye, the Muladhara, the third eye, the top eye, and the nape eye. And in my previous satsangs, I spoke about how all this interlink between these chains of eyes. And when we practice meditation, how in synchronicity they work together and enhance the health of the brain, the body, the mind, and so on. And in the last satsang, I spoke about how the first experience one gets is that connectedness. When we start practicing this meditation, there's a sense of reduction of noise in our mind, our thoughts that are oftentimes very material. It puts us into the sugha and dukkha cycle, up and down. We go through this, but when we practice this meditation, that frequency is modulated and moderated. Ultimately, you see that it becomes more calmer. When that happens, there's a quietude that takes place in our mind. We become more the mind becomes more quiet and silent. And slowly you see that you start becoming transcendental to the space and time continuum. And you're not affected by your bodily experience, nor all the things that are what we call material thoughts. And slowly you see that over time, you start experiencing a particular state, which is, absence of space and time and materiality. And you get to that state, sometimes we call it that the original state of the self. This is the state that we experience in our deep sleep, but this time the mind is awake, conscious, but it's conscious of the state. In sleep, we don't have that experience of that. All we know is that something happens in sleep, all our material identity disappears. And we say, well, we had a very good sleep. What we mean is that we were in a state of absence of body, mind, and time experience. So this state, we become aware as we practice meditation. As the noise reduces, ultimately you come to the threshold of, hey, I don't experience anything, and very subtle, and you touch that. This is the kind of first step of touching that self. When you do it often enough, you see that while you still engage in this world, you still are in that self state. So, which means that the mind that is so accustomed to the material noise, material experiences, the fluctuation of the material world will become more quieter, and that quietude will lead you to a very interesting experience, and that experience is actually the experience of the self. So it takes a while for those who are practicing. You have to practice this diligently, and you see over a period of time, you start experiencing glimpses of this experience. And you see that in this experience, your mind becomes more deeper, your intellect becomes more sharper, your senses become more profound. The material senses starts becoming more quieter, and parts of your brain now is stimulated, and the frequency and the bandwidth of the brain expands, and any subtle things you start experiencing, including ultimately you see that the only thing that you experience is this absence of this material identity. And you see that when you come back after meditation, that experience still resonates. And that becomes the foundation of our life. You become more peaceful, the kind of thoughts that you generate becomes more refined, less, traumatic, less turbulent, less gross. It becomes more and more refined. And when that thoughts become that way, your mind becomes refined, the words that we use become more refined, and you see that our actions become more and more refined and inspirational. So this leads to the healthy lifestyle. So I spoke about this. This is what that spiritual compass that Swamiji speaks about. What is that? Is actually you now the mind starts gravitating towards from the material identity. Try to make sense of the material identity. Why is this happening? How is this? What is this world? What is this universe? The mind gravitates towards understanding the concept of God, and the mind searches, tries to, that thirst of wanting to know what this greater consciousness is, and you start, perusing not just your material. There is two types of knowledge that the mind searches for. The first one is what we call contemporary knowledge. Contemporary knowledge is knowledge that is continuously changing. This is what we learn in schools, from primary schools right up to postdoctoral research centers. How the world, the phenomena world, that changes, from astronomy to zoology, right? The A to Z. And what we see is that that's what we learn in our school system. But we also sometimes we are fortunate that we learn about religion and spirituality. And oftentimes we learn it through a teacher or a master or through our parents. And often it is kind of a very ritualistic. But when the mind pursues the spiritual path, particularly once you are initiated through the practice of a guru in a meditational practice, like how Mahan shows first stage, second stage, third stage, when you got it, you start going deeper. It's not just at the surface level of, oh yeah, okay, this is what the scriptures are, but you want to know deeper, right? And the deeper search becomes, continuously reverberating in you. And you start reading great philosophies, great teachings, scriptures. You start, and the mind's bandwidth becomes more profound, that it can actually, with amazing precision, it is able to decipher and understand that knowledge. What used to be acharas or rituals now become vichara, introspection, contemplation, reflection, and then it itself becomes a meditational sadhana. So you see the concept of God becomes more clearer. The concept of self becomes more clearer. Who am I? What am I? If God is everywhere, infinite, universal, then is there a place God is not? If there is a place God is not there, then that cannot be a universal God, a comprehensive God, a paripurna divinity. So if God is infinite, then God must also be present in me. And that search starts up. So that infinite God, a spark of the divinity must be within me too. And we see that the mind starts, oh, understanding this. This is what we are experiencing in this meditational sadhana when our mind becomes quiet. In that quietude, the mind now becomes sharp like an electron microscope or a telescope that is now focusing to pinpoint the introspection or the phenomena of analysis. So it starts asking questions. What am I? Who am I? And this is where the rational, logical thought comes in. It starts giving away or start separating from dogmatic belief system, to more rational and logical thinking. And this is where you start seeing, you're able to reason why this phenomena is happening. Similarly, you see that you start not just looking at philosophy and spiritual work and the self-realization process, but you use logic and reason with a scientific, intensity. What does it scientific mean? It doesn't mean just laboratory and all. It's actually an evidence-based approach that would I be able to experience this self? What would that experience be? How would I experience this? So this is what the mind starts exploring. It's not about, okay, I just get this vibration and that is it. And you're shocked, Sindiri, you sit down and meditate and I get very nice, that's enlightenment. No, not good enough. Why am I feeling happy? How am I feeling? What is this? You start exploring. Only when you decipher that truth, you see that the truth reveals itself. For most people, they get a very nice feeling and they say a blissful feeling, so that's what enlightenment is. No, one needs to truly understand what that is. So that becomes the foundation of our life, that trying to understand, becoming aware, and being enlightened by it. Something very interesting happens that when you have that spiritual, that is what spiritual connectedness, you connect every facet of our experience, our life, to this greater, you can call it the, substratum that is beyond our body, mind, and our biology. So there's something that is powering us. But when we get caught up with these material things, you see that the mind has very difficult time to decouple from it. There is a very nice saying that Guru Piran Sivasankaran used to say, when the mind is caught by the gravity of materiality, it misses the spirituality. But when the mind decouples from the gravity of materiality, the mind is pulled by the gravity of spirituality. And you see that when that happens, you see that forces of that material gravity weakens and ultimately it doesn't impact us. And this is what this great Mahan's teaching teaches us. So what we saw was that this meditation method from Mahan over the many years of practicing, reflecting on Swamiji's teachings, reflecting on many, many great teachers' teachings, I realized that, this meditation has several benefits. It's not just feeling happy and joyful and decoupling from the world. Actually, it gives you a connected state. What does that connected state means? It is a state where we now know what powers everything in this universe, including us. And that's what that spiritual connectedness or the spiritual compass is. When that happens, we see that, of phases of our lives, the facet of our life starts changing. And this is where we see that our body becomes more healthy, our brain becomes more healthy, and there is a physiological change that happens. And if you can actually observe this. Before you meditate, how was your mind and how was your health? When you start meditating over time, what was the mind's frequency, the brain's frequency, and the body's state? it is said that those who meditate, if you see the chemistry of the brain and the body and the blood, is very different than those who don't meditate, those who are continuously agitated, anxiety, and so on. So there is a direct connection between this meditation that's shown by this Mahan, and I should show you how the structural changes in the brain, and I touched on this in the earlier part, but I'll review and repeat that the structural changes that happens when we practice the first stage, second stage, third stage, and the connectedness that we start getting. Many people say, well, I don't have time for meditation. They squeeze the meditation for 10, 15 minutes in the day, after doing everything else. I always say that, this meditation is the most important part of our lives. You see, it is more important than brushing our teeth or doing everything else. We start the day with meditation and you see that everything that we do becomes a meditational sadhana. Because that's what gives us that spiritual compass that guides us from the time we wake up, brush our teeth, have our shower, prepare ourselves for work or whatever circumstances. That compass becomes the guide. And most people make a mistake that they say, oh, my job is more important, my this is more important, my that is more important. And they don't focus on that spiritual connectedness. What does that mean? It is about time for meditation, time for yourself, time for reading, time for reflection, time for all those things that gives you that self, opportunity to realize that inner resource, that self-development, self-discovery that ultimately leads us to the spiritual compass within us. Mahan wakes up very early in the morning, 4:30, and I try to do that, whatever time I sleep, sometimes, by 4:30, I'm up, do some meditation, do some writing, and then I get back to my research work or other work. So this spiritual connectedness is so important. I see many people, they put priority for everything else, but not that spiritual connectedness. And that has a ramification on us. So when we have that spiritual connectedness and discovery of our spiritual compass, we see that our body, the physical health improves. And that is the second capital, the wealth that we have, right? Our brain and our body starts responding to this connectedness. Over the next few weeks, I'll cover these 10 important capitals that we have in our lives that is very important for us to live an enlightened life. So today I want to focus on the brain and the body. So what we have is that spiritual connectedness has an impact on the physical body, the physical brain itself. I covered extensively, the 12 parts of our brain that goes through rapid transformation and rapid changes when we practice meditation. Initially, you see micro level changes, but over time, you see that micro level changes leads to macro level structural shifts that helps us to acquire all the other capitals, which is actually our physical health, our brain, and our intellectual capital, and so on, which I'll talk about. So today I want to focus on how this connectedness, has an impact on our brain health. One of the things, part of the spiritual connectedness is not just meditation, but allocating time for reading, reflecting, research, so that you can deepen your mind to understand your own self, the processes of the mind, the processes of how the thoughts are generated, the process of how the thoughts are interacting with our daily activities, and more importantly, how it shapes our decision-making process, how it shapes our actions, and how that feedback loop comes back to inform, to impact the way we think. So that loop is so important, but it starts off every day with that meditational technique that Mahan has given us. Gives you the spiritual connectedness, and it improves over time the health of the brain. this is really important for people of any age, but more importantly for people who are aging. Because when we don't use our brain through meditation, introspection, parts of our brain will start shutting down. And when that happens, we have forgetfulness, we have all kinds of other ailments that crops up. So you cannot afford not to meditate, right? I can't emphasize this enough. So what is the health of the brain? You see that I covered extensively in the last few satsangs, but today I want to focus on a few key things. When we practice meditation, the first thing that happens is that the neural connectivity in our brain, becomes more stronger. The synapses connects really well. The flow is there. Parts of your brain starts, going through this neurogenesis. And what is really interesting is that a lot of our growth is impacted by hormones. And there are scientific work which I presented the last time that actually it one of the things that meditation does is that it stimulates something called dopamine. Dopamine is what we call the reward hormone. You feel good, and that is why you see that when you practice meditation you feel so inspirational. You feel so a kind of a positivity. When the time you wake up, you always got that energy to move forward. You've got a presentation, you're well prepared. You've got a decision to make, you've got a committee to chair, you're doing things, you feel so great. And that's because when you meditate, before you do anything else, there's a flush of dopamine in our system that gives us that yes, can do, that positivity, right? So I always tell people that whenever you're preparing for something, whenever you are going to give a presentation or you're going to meet, chair a committee or whatever, sometimes there's anxiety. I say just sit down quietly and meditate, and you see that feel good hormones just starts, giving you that okay, I can do this. You feel that the positivity. So this happens in our brain. So when we meditate, that structural changes actually stimulates dopamine. And there's fantastic literature today that covers this. And I have books that cover this, which I used to wonder when I'm practicing meditation, I feel so high and so inspirational, and sometimes even in the most difficult period, difficult time, you're always having that, okay, let's let's take this slowly, but you feel positive, and that is because there's something happening, and I myself can feel it. Actually, you know what? I feel no problem, can resolve this matter, and I feel good that I can, take this as a challenge. I didn't realize it until I really studied what is happening in me and looking at the literature. I say, this is what's happening. And you can read this in many great saints and sages, including Mahan's book. He says how this meditation gives you that positivity, the courage. And that's because when we meditate, there's a flush of dopamine in our system. The second thing that we see is that when we practice meditation, another important hormone that is stimulated, which is actually the oxytocin. This is what scientists call, the love hormone. It builds trust, it builds relationships, it builds that bonding, and you feel connected. This is tied to that spiritual connectedness that I spoke about, right? And nature's actually embedded this in us because over time, uh, through evolution, nature's built this in many, many species, biological species, so that they look after each other, right? And when they look after each other, you see that uh, the species can thrive, species can do really well, and sustain themselves for a while, a longer period of time. So this oxytocin is really important to build that long-term, as part of the survival of the species, right? In that same way, we see that when we practice meditation, we see that, it makes us happy and it helps us to sustain even during the most difficult period, right? It helps us with our relationships in every facet of our lives, right? The next one is actually serotonin. This is again a hormone that is very important because we go through, as I said, up and down, and sometimes this hormone helps us to moderate and modulate, that cycles. So it gives us a calm, cool, composure so that the body is able to make decisions in a very strategic way. So we see that this hormone is also very important for the health and the well-being of our body. It also generates happiness when we are calm and cool. We're not perturbed by anything. We're able to rationalize things. We're able to sift through difficult things. And it's also an important hormone that generates joy and happiness. And the last one is actually endorphins. These four hormones are so important. When we practice meditation, it is flushed into our system. It gives us that willpower. It helps us generate, reinforce the positivity, that inspirational and, the good habits, not to harm people, not to speak badly of anyone, think positively. Always Mahan says, Sandosa, be glad and happy. And this is what we see among meditators, that they're not harsh, they're gentle, graceful, you see, but yet powerful. They have a force within themselves that drive it. On the surface, they look like a swan that is, swimming on the lake, beautifully gliding through. But at the bottom, they're pedaling really, really hard. This is what the meditators do. People don't see them meditating, but you can see them gliding through beautifully in their lives. And when you do this, you see that, many things happen. There's a sense of focus, the mind becomes more inquiring, our stress reduces, our memory improves, a whole host of positive things that happens in our lives. Whatever we do, yes, it may be challenging, but yet we will succeed. We'll be able to achieve the aspirations that we want, whether it's bodily health or whether it's your studies or whether it's your professional life or your family life, because you have that agility and the mental stamina that the brain and the mind, remember, the brain and the body is the hardware, the mind and the intellect is the software. When the hardware is operating really well, the software called the mind and intellect will also operate very well. So this Mahan's meditation method helps to strengthen the hardware, which is the brain and the body. And in that process, when the brain and body is strong, the mind is able to operate efficiently, the intellect is able to operate efficiently, and you see that our life becomes more enriched. And this is the wonder of these great Mahan's teachings. So what do we get? We see that this meditational practice gives us that connected state, helps us to focus on the ICRMS, which is introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, and that spiritual, societal, the social. We extend beyond our own biology. We see that our body becomes healthy. We understand the soul and the Atma and the spirit. We understand great philosophies of the I God. The I is nothing but the divinity, the spark of divinity. We discover our spiritual compass. These are the key pillars, which is in bold, that starts taking place. Our body, understanding our soul, our mind, I see it. And then the rest all comes through. We sleep well, we're able to eat well, we're able to select the food we have time for exercise, we have time for our business and our professional life, we have the problem solving. So the bold thing stands out first, and then the rest come through. And this is what the power of this great Mahan's teachings that I want to share with all of you. This is the second capital, but it will not take place if we don't generate the spiritual capital. Without the spiritual capital and that connected state, we would not be able to appreciate nor experience that wonder of life. That is starting with the health of the body, the mind, the brain, the intellect. And this is what I have experienced over the last 45 years, seen what Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, and many people who have practiced this meditation and put it to practice and have blossomed in every facet of their life. I hope you too will do. Next week, I'll speak about how uh, other capitals, which is our intellect, our emotional state, are impacted by this connected state which Mahan showed through this meditational method. Santosham.